Hi, I'm Sam Levine, and I'd like to thank you for coming to the Capitalist Gene. To start, I'd like to show you a few videos.
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade.
Well, I thank you for your question, but I have to say we're capitalist, and that's just the way it is.
Overall, capitalism is intrinsic to the human species. Capitalism is not something we invented. Capitalism is not even something we discovered. It is innate to us in every exchange that we have.
This is the last thing I downloaded. What if I just deleted it?
We just invented again.
Well, thank you very much. I'm greatly honored to be here and to deliver this inaugural Copernican lecture. Few mysteries are emerging in the context of the journey of humankind. As I said earlier, the mystery of economic growth. Why is it the case that economic growth emerged only in the past 2 centuries after literally 300,000 years of stagnation? We would like to understand what is the role of deep-rooted factors, historical factors, prehistorical factors, biogeographical conditions that were formed literally hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, and as we will see, even tens of thousands of years ago, on the divergence in income per capita as we see it today. What is the contribution of evolutionary processes in the transition from stagnation to growth? Child mortality declines, fertility increases, and life expectancy increases. And consequently, there is positive effect of income on population. Unlike today's world, this is a time period in which richer people have higher reproductive success. During the Malthusian epoch, we see the evolution of human traits. And why is it so? Naturally, the Malthusian pressure, as I just argued, determines the size of the population. But it doesn't determine only the size of the population, it determines the composition of the population. And why is it so? Well, if there are certain traits, hereditary traits, that generates higher income, in the Malthusian epoch, they will generate higher reproductive success. Richer people have higher reproductive success. And consequently, if the richness is originated in better or in more appropriate cognitive or physical traits, and if these traits are transmitted intergenerationally, this would imply, as I said, that these traits will become more and more prevalent in the population. So according to Jared Diamond, the Analytic Revolution, which, as I said, is the transition of societies from hunter-gatherer tribes to agricultural communities, generated the emergence of non-food producing class, individuals that could be engaged in knowledge creation in the form of languages, in the form of science, and in the form of technology. And this knowledge creation generated a technological head start. The migratory distance of Homo sapiens from Africa affected the distribution of population diversity across the globe and ultimately comparative economic development. It accounts, as I said, for 1/6 of the variations in income per capita across the globe.
Please welcome to the TEDx Sonoma County stage, Gregory Clark.
Thank you. Is it really just resources, culture, and networks, or could it actually be genes that determine people's social position? Now, the surprising evidence, and a lot of this is rehearsed in my book, is that most status transmission is at least highly consistent with genetic transmission. If status is genetically inherited, then you get some very interesting predictions about what these patterns will look like. If we plot people here in terms of their genetic distance, that should completely predict what the correlation in status will be. And so here we're showing the correlation in wealth as a function of distance and status. Now, once you get to the point of second cousins, most people don't know who their second cousins are. They've never met them. Certainly the third cousins, you have no idea. What's amazing in this picture is that it exactly fits the predictions of the genetic model. The social world has a lot of rigidity. What seems to happen is that people have a kind of status phenotype which is in rapid flux between generations, but underlying this is a status genotype which is being passed on much more faithfully. And so if you're high status and your kids don't do so well, what's interesting is you can predict that the grandchildren will bounce back because of this status genotype that's passed. It may be the case that at birth, that's when the dice is cast, but it means that we actually live in a world where parents actually are able to do much less than we think to change the outcomes for their children. Go home tonight and relax. It's all done already. Thank you very much.
It's clear that the dominant political and cultural narrative denies the possibility of any real alternative to capitalism. This resignation to the status quo relies in part on a mostly unspoken, but nevertheless always present assumption that our current political, cultural, and economic realities are fundamentally unalterable because they are products of human nature itself. The logical conclusion of this viewpoint, a viewpoint which is occasionally boosted by academics such as Dr. Gregory Clark, is that capitalism has a physical, material basis in our bodies, that capitalism is itself hard-coded into our DNA. Or as Dr. Clark says, the triumph of capitalism in the modern world may lie as much in our genes as in ideology or rationality. Could this be true? Does capitalism have a genetic basis? What makes some people good at doing capitalism? What is inside of a good capitalist? In other words, what's inside of him? What's inside of him or him? And what's inside of him? What is inside of all of these capitalists? At last, we may find out. The capitalist gene is a first of its kind initiative to tackle the human nature question head on, to isolate capitalism on a genetic level. This project will be enacted in 3 phases. In phase 1 of the initiative, which is the current phase, we will collect genetic samples from noted capitalists. In phase 2, we will sequence the DNA we have collected and attempt to isolate a capitalist gene. And in phase 3, we will attempt to insert the capitalist gene into other species to see if they begin to exhibit capitalist behaviors. The capitalist gene is a citizen science project. It requires a large-scale cooperative effort, and I invite you to join us. To participate, all you have to do is collect and submit a genetic sample from a capitalist. Before you can submit a sample, you must first locate a capitalist. But what is a capitalist? A capitalist is a person that profits by exploiting the labor of others. A capitalist is not a person who lives in a capitalist society. A capitalist is not someone who longs to be rich. A capitalist is not a person who likes going shopping. A capitalist is not a manager. A capitalist may or may not be a boss. A capitalist may or may not believe in capitalism. A person who is not a capitalist may say that they are a capitalist. A capitalist is a person with a specific material relationship to workers. A capitalist is a person who owns capital. Capital is private property, which is another word for means of production, like a factory or a data center. Capital is not personal property, like a phone or a t-shirt. Where should you look for a capitalist, and how will you know if you find one? Think of all the people in your life. What is their relationship with labor? Are any of them capitalists? Think of all the strangers you see in the street and hear about in the news. Are any of them capitalists? If you are unsure how to locate a capitalist, consider using a private jet tracker. If you work at a company, you could ask to have a meeting with your company's owner or a major shareholder. And of course, if you yourself are a capitalist, you can also voluntarily donate a genetic sample if you meet the criteria. Step 1 can be a difficult step. Steps 2 through 10 are easier. And for demonstration purposes, I will now put on the Jeff Bezos filter. That's better. Step 2 is to wash or sanitize your hands. And then to put on personal protective equipment, such as gloves and a mask. Step 3 is to verify that the capitalist's mouth is empty. Step 4 is to carefully remove the swab from its package. You should avoid touching the swab tip with gloves or other surfaces. Step 5 is to hold the swab low on the handle, away from the tip. Step 6 is to have the capitalist open their mouth and immediately bring the swab tip to the inside of the cheek. Firmly rub and rotate the swab along the inside of the cheek for 5 to 10 seconds, ensuring that the swab tip has made contact with the cheek. Then you place the swab directly into the transport tube or collection envelope. You fill out the sample collection form, indicating the time and date, location, name of the capitalist, and any relevant notes. And finally, you can mail your sample to the Capitalist Gene at 1013 Willoughby Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11221. It's quite easy to make your own sample collection kit. All you need is a swab, personal protective gear, such as gloves and a mask, and a sample tube or container. You can also order a free sample collection kit while supplies are available at capitalistgene.xyz. In addition to cheek swabs, we will gladly accept any other viable genetic material. Thank you.